is the two principals. Thank you very much for joining and supporting me tonight. I appreciate that. And the other people I'd like to acknowledge are the people that supplied some of the information that's coming up tonight on our little seminar. I'll just read them out briefly because at the end of the night we may not have time, or by then you may have all fallen asleep. So the first one is the prescribed list, the RSPBA prescribed list of tunes for grade 4, which is the mapping system, the MAP. It's known as the MAP system, musical appreciation. That's what it's short for. That prescribed list is we've been trying to promote for many years in Australia, and I think there are some very, very conduits in it to a good performance. The RSPBA structured learning books, the elementary and the intermediate. I'll just show you those. For those that haven't seen these books, this is the structured learning book for the intermediate, and that is the book for the elementary. Now, both of those books are available online at no charge. Now, I also have the RSPBA structured learning book for the advanced, but you won't need that for this workshop. The third thing I'd like to mention is a rubric that was done in Victoria by for the ensemble expectations for grade 4 bands, which is quite an informative paper, and I would recommend that you read that. It's available on the Ensemble PBA website. The fourth item is Greg Bassani's basic section tuning for pipe bands. And as you know, for those that have read it, it goes into quite some detail on tuning. I don't want to go into that tonight because it's just far too complicated. But it's a very, very good article. And the fifth one is the tenor tuning and bass drum tuning by Tyler Fry, which are very good. It's a very good paper. Tyler Fry is a very knowledgeable musician. So there you are. That's the credits. So now we will proceed. Tonight we're going to discuss the inclusion of ensemble into our musical performance. And thank you all for attending. At the conclusion we will hold a short section on questions. You'll have to put up with me reading because I can't remember all this. What is the purpose of having the discipline of ensemble in today's pipe band competition and performance? And what do we mean by ensemble? Ensemble is a French word meaning together at the same time. The Pipe Band Association printed in 2006 a meaning of ensemble, and I'll briefly read that to you, which is the overall music effect of a combination of bagpipes and drums. The instruments are well pitched and tuned, giving a nicely balanced result, playing in unison with rhythm, expression and harmony. The melody being effectively accompanied by tasteful percussion, reinforcing the rhythm and providing expression through subtle musical interpretation, phrasing and dynamics. So there you have the meaning of ensemble in the pipe band world. What is the purpose of having the discipline of ensemble in today's pipe band competition of performance, and what do we mean by ensemble? With this in mind, there are four main elements of ensemble that will include tonal integration, technical integration, musicality, and quality of musicianship of arrangement. Well, the Scottish model will say introduction, intonation, integration, and interpretation. Sound is everything. How often after a band's performance in competition or a concert? Do you hear the question, and how did the band sound? Now we are looking at the overall art of piping and drumming playing together to produce the best musical performance for the adjudicators and the audience. Let's not forget the audience, because without them, there is no competition. How do we do this? The musicians have to learn how to listen to the band holistically, and then learn how to listen to each section of the band while they are playing. We're now going to play a band, a grade 2 band in Scotland, an Australian band that was visiting Scotland, and they're going to play a 6/8 march. And I would like you to listen to and concentrate on the melody, the snare line arrangement, and the middle section voicing, including the bass drum. It can be difficult at first. Separate each section in your mind. This is where percussion players should be very familiar with the melody and in fact should strive to sing at least part of the tune. Are we right to go?
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
Well, now you've heard that. Now we will listen to the band's 6/8 march performance as a whole. This is how the ensemble adjudicator assesses the band's performance. To achieve this, you will need 100% concentration because you are listening to 3 separate sections at once. And this is where ensemble is generated from within the circle. Remember, stamina, concentration, endurance, and control. Please play it again, Dave.
All right, Rob.
Oh, thank you, Dean. Thank you. Okay, can we have our audience back? Thank you. They're coming back gradually. I hope you can all hear, and I hope you enjoyed that lovely 6/8. The first thing is you ask yourself, how did it sound? Was there blend and balance? Did you hear the ensemble overall sound? That's what you've got to think to yourself. And those people that were lucky enough to have headphones on, they would have heard the middle section playing and how beautifully they were playing. Now we have to learn to listen. Let's progress playing as an ensemble. The first thing we've got to consider is we have to select melodies that are well known as well as contemporary charts. Time signatures can be included as well. Originality. Ask the lead drummer to compose the snare accompaniment and middle section rhythm arrangements. This objective keeps them familiar with the melodic line and is a great learning tool for all the leaders, particularly with composition. Keep the tempo bright and uplifting. We must do that. Dragging the tempo down leads to separation in a band's performance. We start with the attack. Here the pipers put into practice the correct and controlled blowing techniques they have practiced. Make sure drummers are familiar with playing opening rolls correctly and in time with the quick march command. Far too many tempo drops are as a result of a poor entry, either the pipe or drum corps failing to concentrate. This is where your skills of listening, which we've just been doing, are vital, particularly to the bass drummer when you're playing as an ensemble. The introductory rolls and the piping entry set the mood for the audience. We call it a great start. Now the dynamics come into focus. The melody line, bright and expressive. The snare line using unisons effectively and controlling their weight dynamically to create expression on evenly tuned and responsive snare drums. Isn't that a magic sound? Just like a beautifully tuned pipe core. The middle section voicing. Now this is very interesting because you would have just heard the middle section voicing in that 6/8 march that Hawthorne played. Because we have to tune the basic section in concert B flat, the bass drum is concert B flat, the first tenor and is concert B flat, one octave above, then D and F, which is the triad. Together with the arrangement, the choreography and flourishing while providing colour and movement can aid in the rhythmic and timing aspect of the performance and is highly regarded in first-class pipe band performance. Remembering that piping, snare line and middle or basic section are subcomponents of ensemble. We must keep that in our mind all the time. The pipe major has to be seen by the lead drummer and the bass drummer so that the lead drummer can focus on the pipe major's foot and the bass drummer for on and off the beat. The lead drummer is also focusing on off the beat, in particular in reels on 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and, that type of feel. The bass should be the dominant pitch throughout the performance, and it is a magnificent instrument when it's tuned correctly. Now we can hear the balance between the chanters and the drones and effective harmonies during the performance. The pitch must be maintained at all time. Remember, sound is everything. Now we listen to the balance throughout the ensemble piping and drumming, neither too dominant. This is the technical integration of the intercore, which is between each core, or the intracore in its integration within the respective cores. Avoid playing airs too slowly and cutting the air arrangement short. This is the adagio tempo mark and should be presented musically. And take care here, for the pitch can vary. Ensemble is about taking the global view of a musical performance and not getting bogged down in technical details. That's why we have piping and drumming adjudicators. Ensemble is essentially an oral experience highlighted by the visual impact from the midsection choreography and flourish. The strathspey can be viewed as the test piece, and here the idiom, correct dance feel, can be presented effectively by using the skills of piping and drumming arrangements. The metrical accenting of strong, weak, medium, weak can in fact be varied according to the melody, but only higher grade bands would attempt this. During your performance, allow space throughout phrasing to create a relaxed mood. Mood is a big word in ensemble because that's how we play, how we feel. Avoid playing too much on charters and practice pads. Use your real instrument as often as practical as possible, because clarinets and flutes don't have a choice. Transitions to allow time signatures. Between time signatures, try and avoid complicated breaks and bridges so as to allow smooth transitions between time signatures. In conclusion, I would like to say this. Remember to listen to each section of your band while playing, because we have to, as an ensemble, create blend, balance and excitement. Does your performance have the wow factor? Only by attending to detail can this be achieved. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions, anyone, or perhaps Brett or Dean, perhaps you might like to come in there, you know, about the individual cores in their role towards the greater holistic ensemble feel.
Brett, would you like to say one or two things before I do?
No, you go ahead, Dean. Piping, we're not too concerned about ensemble because we're everything. Without us, there is nothing.
Touche.
Hi, Robert.
Yeah. So, well, Brett does have a point there. Absolutely. A pipe band consists of pipers, 3 kinds of drums to accompany the piping melody. We're absolutely accompanists. However, absolutely necessary to create a proper pipe band.
Absolutely.
So absolutely necessary. I think from my perspective, from a drumming perspective, the most important line once performance has started, the most important line is timing, and that the integration That's what the integration is. That the integration of timing between all of the snare drummers, all of the tenors, the bass drum, every piper, every single member of that ensemble group is playing at exactly the right moment collectively together to the ensemble point of time. And that's why we like to play and practice, rehearse on contest days, running through our sets, not just contests, but even at concerts. The rehearsals are all about fine tuning everybody's sense of what the tempos are going to be. The closest sense of that combined tempo, the closer that we can all become, the better the ensemble output will be in the end.
Now we have a couple of questions that have come up. Callum McSween has asked, Rob, can you expand more on transitions? And then we have one from Deborah that says, any thoughts about tuning the drums to the pipes, i.e. pitch? So maybe Rob, you'd like to address perhaps the one on transitions first.
Sure. Thank you very much, Brett. Transition is moving from one time signature to another. For example, moving from a hornpipe into a stress pay, for example. Not a difficult transition. And at grade 4, I would thoroughly recommend that it be done as simply as possible, so that the effect is in fact not with the transition, but with the melody of the next tune. Transition is only one means of getting from one tune to another. Higher grade bands can do all sorts of things, but in grade 4 bands, even in grade 3 bands, they stick basically to very traditional transitions. I'm just trying to find another thing I want to say to that. You have to be very careful when you're playing a transition that you're going to go into the next tune correctly and in time, and that if they're going to be a piping transition where they're doing a bridge, for example, that has to be done tastefully and together. Can I elaborate on that anymore, or because I can't see you?
Nothing's come up, Rob.
I can't see you, Callum.
That was a good expansion, Rob, I would say.
Callum says that's great.
Oh, okay. No problem at all.
So what about this question about the tuning of drums? Is that something you would like to touch on a bit further, Rob?
Yeah, no problem at all. Because the pipes are a transposing instrument, we actually have to tune in B flat major. And what we do is, if you know the chords in B flat major, the best chords the best chord to use is B flat, D, F, and B flat, one octave up. So if you're actually playing a chord of 4 notes, right? If you're playing 3 notes, you're playing a triad. If you're playing 4 notes, you're playing a full chord. So without getting into too much more technical detail, remembering that I'm a drummer, not a piper, they are quite lovely. The B flat, the D and the F are very nice together, the 3 of them, and the 4 of them are superb. So if you play those 4 on your piano, you won't go wrong. And they are, by the way, tuned to A, C and E on the cello.
Now, Rob, would you tune to A, C, and E on a chromatic tuner, or a B, D, and F on a chromatic tuner, or would you tune them to a scale which matches with the alterations we have to the bagpipe scale?
The alterations is very difficult to comment on because they're many and varied. I prefer to just sit down at the piano and play B flat, D, F, and I find that they're a very, very nice chord to actually tune the middle section to.
So my point is that if you've got, for example, your on your bagpipe scale with A, C, and E, your C is a lot lower in pitch than it would be on a chromatic scale. So you'd tune it to the C on a piano, or you would tune it to the C on a bagpipe?
No, the C on the bagpipe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any reasoning behind that? Because I know that some wouldn't. Well,
without getting too complicated about it, I mainly refer to, and I go along with Tyler Fry's notes on a lot of tuning, because he's delved into it in a very hefty way, and he is very familiar with the correlation between the bagpipe and the B flat major scale on the concert B flat.
Yep.
I don't really want to get too involved with this tonight because I don't see the point in going any further than people need to actually tune their tenor drums, and that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about tuning your tenor drum, and I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that seemed to be what the question was about, I assume. Now, there's some other questions here as well. Does that mean that ensemble is more about the playing oblique music rather than the overall composition and tune selection? Are musical tunes better than technical tunes?
That's a good question, actually, because I think I covered that when I said, when we were talking about tune selection. Yeah. Select melodies that are well known as well as contemporary tunes and blend them in a medley or what have you, because people identify with a well-known melody, and you've only got to look at I think it was who played oh my goodness mate, it's gone out of my head, but you'll often hear grade 1 bands and high grade 2 bands playing well-known melodies. Like you'll hear Train Journey North, for example, in Field Marshall's repertoire, and then you'll hear something else you've never heard before, but it still sounds fabulous. So by all means,
if I may, Rob, being an ensemble adjudicator myself, if I was asked that question, I would suggest that the main thing for me is that a band is playing tunes that meet the capabilities of its players.
Good point.
So there's plenty of cases where bands want to play the latest and greatest tunes. Some of them are quite technically complicated, and not all the players are necessarily up to the job, and that detracts from the overall performance. And in the end, and this goes to the question of tempos as well, quite often pipe corps learning new tunes, you've got to start quite slowly. You've got to play probably to the tempo that can be handled by the weakest player if you want the best quality out of everyone. That's quite often the case, and I'm speaking as a drumming adjudicator and an ensemble adjudicator. Drummers can always play faster. Often drummers always want to play faster, and you can end up with this pushing effect. There's also a point to which some drumming scores are written to play at a certain tempo, and trying to slow them down from that leads to all sorts of problems with phrasing and just not being able to space things out well enough to fit a tune at a slower tempo. So there's a lot of conversation that's got to go on between the leading drummer, the pipe major, any tutors involved in the setup. And you want to find that balance where the tempos match the ability of the players, the complexity of the tunes match the ability of the players. You're still playing things that, you know, maybe a mixture of recognisable things and things that are a little bit unusual or different, interesting. And you start to get into problems, and you can tell somewhat when a band is moving out of that comfort zone, I think, where the drummers want to play faster than the pipers adequately can or capably can, or the drummers are trying to play something that's just too complicated for the ability relative to the tempo of the tune as it's being played. So it's a very complicated thing. I think at heart, probably everyone who's got anything to do with pipe bands knows when that sort of thing is starting to go wrong. And it goes possibly also to Dean's point earlier about rehearsing. When you're practicing tunes, an issue is if when you're doing your run-throughs, there's inconsistency in the tempo. So no one's quite settled on a tempo that they could be possibly playing at. It keeps changing. And in things like march, trespass and reels, playing independently with the tempos of each of the tunes relative to the other. Because there is a natural flow through or tempo progression between marches, trespass and reels, for example. And if you play a really quick march and then it goes into quite a slow strathspey because, for example, it's a little bit too complicated, got to take it slowly, want to express it, players aren't quite on it, and then the reel takes off again. It just doesn't sound right. So it's within an ensemble's adjudicator's purview to comment if there's a thought that there are issues there, the tune selection may be being too difficult. I mean, in the end, it's just hopefully an objective view of things. It's difficult. Bands can't just change tunes willy-nilly. And that's why a lot of thought, I think, has to go into setting up medleys and even selections of marches, key changes, the tempo even in a set of marches being able to flow through consistently from one end to the other and not one march ending up being slower than the other that is either side of it, for example. So just a few things, I don't mean to butt in, but just a few things occurred to me with those points.
Not at all, mate. Yeah, well.
We got some other questions here from Robin Livingston. Can you expand on the contribution of tenor drum flourishing to ensemble? Snare drummers and pipers play all notes essentially, but the tenor drummers do not. So is ensemble taking in visualness as well as playing the music together, if that makes sense?
A very good question. The answer is no.
Next question.
Not really. I'll just like to elaborate on that. With flourish and choreography, or whatever you call it, it's highly regarded in first-class pipe band music and is part of our idiom, if you like to put it that way. We don't allocate points for flourish because, assuming that the drumming judge or ensemble judge is blind, he wouldn't be able to tell you. Thank you.
The next point is, can we expand a little more on the use of harmonies?
Brett, could you?
I can expand a little bit more. I think there's a number of very important things that need to be looked at with the use of harmonies. One is the overuse of harmonies. So first of all, we wouldn't use harmonies in the MSR, for example, but in a medley, I think the overuse of harmonies is a problem. The timing of harmonies is a problem. Often you hear the harmony players not playing in time with the rest of the band, which becomes an integration issue. The other thing is the appropriate place for harmonies. Where you have the overuse of harmonies, you can also have the underuse of harmonies, and they come in places where they aren't really appropriate. So I guess the main thing with harmonies is it has to be done tastefully and appropriately, and the harmonies have to be correct. Theory-wise, it's far too complex to go into in the short amount of time that we have here. But basically, I construct harmonies around cadences. So I look at the closing cadences at the end of phrases and the end of parts. So when you construct your harmonies, you look at those as being commas and full stops, so that you don't end up with a part that sounds like it's supposed to be dragging you to somewhere else. You end up with an end of a part that sounds like it ends. So your harmonies are then constructed around those. So you do the ends of phrases, you do the ends of parts, you make them sound appropriate, and then you join the dots in between and stick basically to the rules of counterpoint. So I don't know whether we need to expand more on harmony for that. The next question is regarding the universal 440 tuning. I can field this one if you want, Rob. I think the universal 440 tuning is not going to happen in piping. To tune to 440 on a day is not possible. If you've got a cold day, a hot day, whatever, your tuning's going to change as the day progresses. And you know, we can certainly encourage bands to stick to a more appropriate generalized tuning, but we're not an orchestra. Bands want to increase in pitch. People like the pitch that it's going to. Some don't. Yeah, it's a personal taste thing. If bands think that 440 is going to win a contest for them, come out tuned in 440 and see how you do. But I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where we have a universal number that we have to tune to. Next question, running down here, there's a few other things. What are some techniques for bands to improve their ensemble?
Right. The first one is the one I started off with, listening. You actually have to listen to each section of the band playing. For example, you have to listen to the bass drummer. You have to listen to the melody line. You have to listen to the snare line. And you have to listen to the basic section or middle section. And you have to be able to identify what they're actually doing. That takes a lot to do that. And Stephen, as an ensemble adjudicator as well, would know how difficult it is when you've got to write a report in 5 minutes on a band's performance when they're doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things. You've got to take an overview of their performance. And I think probably one of the most important things is to have endurance, to be match fit to play in a band performance, to have a very good knowledge of your music, of your scores and your arrangements. But number one is sound. You must have the right sound. You can go out onto the park with all the technical ability you like, but if you haven't got sound, you've got nothing. So sound is the most important thing, in my opinion. And then following that is, of course, concentration and watching the leaders in the corps. Like you must watch the pipe major, you must watch the bass drummer, and you must listen to everybody. That's about all I can say there without going on too long about it.
Oh, I don't think
Would you like to contribute to that, Brett?
No. I think that's fine. I think ensemble is a matter of awareness. If people are listening, and the more you practice, and the more you encourage people to listen to the overall sound and the overall contribution by the cause, I think you'll end up with bands that start playing closer together. But I think also ensemble starts during the construction phase. If you construct something which uh, in which ensemble is borne in mind during the construction process, I think the end result is going to be a lot better. So, if you construct a medley, for example, which has attractive transitions and has attractive tunes, has attractive key changes, it has appropriate use of harmony, it has drum scores that fit, the tunes are capable of being played well by the standard of players in the band, you choose the appropriate tempos, then I think you're 90% there. So I think a lot of bands let themselves down during the construction phase.
Absolutely.
I think one of the, if I can jump in again, one of the things that probably you can say of everybody in pipe bands, no matter what grade they're in, these days with access to YouTube and streaming of competitions coming from all over the world and everything else, everyone knows, I would say, what a good band sounds like. And if you stick to the sort of the risk minimization, even if you're a band leader standing back and listening to your band play, the drummer's not dominating the pipers, the tenors or the bass not too loud. One of the things that helps enormously, and you can actually hear it in the 6/8 really well, that we heard earlier, was the bass drummer not just being consistent in the tempo, but playing metrical accents such that it propelled the tune and it highlighted the phrasing.
Absolutely.
Bass drummers that just whack out, it may be a very steady beat, but just thump, 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 thump detracts from ensemble. Tenor work that's too busy. And going back to the point on flourishing, great for the spectators. Rob's correct, as adjudicators, we don't look at it. But what we might start to comment on is if the flourishing disrupts the flow of the playing. When done, to get the number of rotations, the catch and the note being played in time, if the flourishing upsets that, it's an issue. And I think that it can work the other way for experienced tenor drummers. That flow and movement visually actually does translate to their expression of the tune when done well. It's seamless, it flows. And I think if you see some of the better bands do that, it becomes apparent that choreography, even though you couldn't see it if you closed your eyes, as the point was made, there's more to it going on in the drummers' minds who are actually playing it. So yeah, stand back from the band and have a look. Are there obvious things that could be addressed? Are the tempos consistently played from one run through to the next? And going right back to the start, it's amazing how many bands, the pipe major or whoever is giving the words of command, give the words of command in one tempo and the band takes off in another. And it's actually really quite obvious that the band is used to playing at a particular tempo. And what's actually happening is that whoever gives the words of command is being ignored. It doesn't lead to a particularly good introduction usually, but you sort of know when a band has a particular groove for a tune that they fall into. And the same thing if they start out of that groove, but then fall back into it within the first phrase or two. So all of those things are things you can look at. They're little details, But if you work from a risk minimisation point of view, what are ensemble adjudicators going to write about? They're going to write about the obvious things that stand out in a performance as not quite being right. So that point about listening, it's not just listening to yourselves, it's listening to other bands, higher graded bands, and not trying to replicate them. That's, you know, that leads us down the path of grade 4 bands trying to reproduce Field Marshall or Inverary medleys, which doesn't happen with any great level of success. But listen to the things about the balance in volume, the pitches of tenors, the natural pitch of tenors, the higher pitches carry through the band and outside the band more than the lower pitches. So you want to encourage any tenors at a higher pitch range not playing as loud as the ones at the lower pitch range. Tenors can still play metrical accent. Too many tenors with chord progressions, if the tuning's not quite right, they shouldn't all be playing at once, for example. So there's all sorts of little things you can do to just clean up a performance. I'll leave it there.
Very much.
Thank you.
Chris.